One of the residents who spoke, she was saying, everybody here knows somebody with cancer. She's like, 2 people in my family have cancer, and I battled cancer. At one point, they pointed out a backyard that had a wall, and there you could see the oil bubbling up out of the ground. And she started talking about the fact, we don't have gardens. We can't grow food here because the ground's toxic. We don't have outdoor pets because they'll eat what's in the yard and they will die. So imagine we're people who are living here. How safe is this for us? We can't have flowers and pets, but we live here.
Hi, and welcome to the Know Your Rights Camp podcast. I'm Dee.
And I'm Amihere.
And we're here to talk about topics that affect Black and Brown communities nationwide and worldwide. Today, we're going to talk about environmental justice with Afro LA founder and executive director, Dana Amihere.
Dana is an award-winning designer, developer, and Dana journalist. She has a passion for digital storytelling and created compelling news experiences for audiences. Dana previously worked in data reporting, interactive design, and news app development for the Baltimore Sun, Pew Research Center, and the Dallas Morning News. She completed her undergraduate at Wesleyan College and her master's degree in journalism at the University of Maryland. Thanks for joining us, Dana.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, tell us about Afro LA.
So, Afro LA is a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom for Los Angeles. We tell stories through the lens of the Black community. And a lot of people mistake that for, well, you're solely Black press. You only cover Black communities. And that's not true. We cover issues that impact most poignantly Black communities, Latina communities, other historically marginalized communities, and vulnerable groups like people experiencing homelessness, other folks who don't necessarily always have a voice in how they are able to advocate for themselves. So our news is for all of those folks, and it's about and for all of those folks, for a wider and greater Los Angeles area.
Got it. So Afro LA is community-driven, data-driven. What sort of topics do you cover?
So we have verticals ranging from climate and sustainability, from culture to housing to education. The topics that we cover are actually the result of really asking our community, what do you want to hear and see from us? We did that before we did anything else. And that's why environmental racism and climate change are such a big part of what we do.
Nice. Can you talk a little bit about your journey into journalism and what led you to starting Afro LA?
So I've been in journalism in some shape or form as a professional for more than 10 years. I teach data journalism and I teach core journalism basics at the college level, and also have done some work at the high school level as well, across all the states that I have found myself in, most recently for University of California, Berkeley. I found myself in the piece of journalism that I'm in now as a news leader kind of by accident. I never imagined that I would lead a newsroom and that I would be running 2 companies. I also have a freelance business that I started before I decided to start Afro LA. As you might have guessed, Afro is a nod to the Black community, though, of course, we don't exclusively cover Black communities. But it's about intersectionality. It's about the crossover in between these communities. So we've recently started reporting a lot on Afro-Latina communities. That is the result of kind of how I've worked and forayed through journalism. There's been a lot of cross-sectionality and intersectionality in the work that I've done. So it's not just straight news reporting. It's not just audio projects. It's not just interactive design. It's not just, working on impact plans as to how you can distribute this work and how you can make the maximum footprint with it. It's all of those things kind of jumbled up together in one big mash in order to tell stories in the most powerful way possible and to get it to the people who most need to read it.
Nice. And I see one of the topics that Afro LA has covered extensively has been environmental justice and environmental racism.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that, but start by defining maybe what are some of the things that go into environmental racism?
Sure. So one of the easiest ways to think about environmental racism is to think about your personal life. So when you turn on the tap, when you go outside and take a big breath of fresh air, the ground that you walk on, you expect none of those things to be contaminated. Environmental racism is when those things are not okay, when they're toxic, when they're contaminated, and the area that they're concentrated in are the result of the people who live there and the color of their skin. If you are familiar with redlining, when Black folks were denied access to homeownership and they were relegated to the red line parts of the city that were less desirable, those maps line up almost perfectly with some of the environmental issues that we see today, because those less desirable areas were purposefully put near industry and infrastructure problems and toxicity, that some of which still persists today.
Do you have any examples that you can share for folks who are just sort of learning about this, who may not have realized that they are next to these red line communities or even in these red line communities?
Sure. So communities, even just here in Los Angeles County, that people might not realize that they are impacted by environmental racism. Inglewood has the third largest oil field in the United States, and that has persisted since the 1920s. Wilmington, which is near the Port of LA, has problems with toxicity from not only oil, but the air quality from the different ships and warehousing that come with the port. They have problems in other parts of the county with groundwater contamination. There are some communities that are located near lead smelters and toxic trash dumps that it may not necessarily have been in your lifetime, but the persistence of those things persist through the generations. So it may have been your grandparents who are living through it, but you're still impacted by that today. Those things don't just disappear from the earth and from, areas that families live in.
Nice. Can you share a little bit about the Next Door project that Afro LA did? It's this very interdisciplinary, comprehensive journalism project that looks like you all partner with schools and artists and different things to expose some of these issues in LA.
Yes. Environmental Justice Next Door is one of the projects from Afro LA that I am most proud of. It was the culmination of 9 months of work, a coordination and collaboration between Afro LA, between a group that has global presence, Black women photographers, but we worked with their local LA chapter, and a collection of high school students from a local charter school out of El Segundo that I previously worked with for Afro LA. The project came together because I had previously worked with one of the teachers at Da Vinci Communications High School. He teaches podcasting, and the students were looking for a way to take the skills that they had learned a little bit more into the real world and to tell impactful stories. So the students that were part of this, we had teams of 9 students with 9 different photographers. These students were not doing this as part of a regular class. These were students who were doing this for honors credit. So this was after school, on weekends, talking about it during the one honors period that they got every few weeks. So these were really committed students. And asking a 15 or 16-year-old, hey, will you spend a Saturday going on a toxic tour, is pretty impressive of them to step up and show up. So the project was designed so that the pairs of students, they spoke to advocates in the community, they spoke to residents who were directly impacted by 4 different things that we tried to highlight. So water contamination, oil infrastructure, poor air quality, and warehousing and trucking infrastructure that impacts residential areas. So each student photographer pair was sent out to cover one of these areas, one of these 4 areas, and their task was really to go interview someone who fell under the umbrella of that, whether they lived through it, whether they research it, whether they try to help mitigate it. And in doing so, we wound up documenting these different issues, not only through splendid photography and just breathtaking documentary work by these professionals, but also by very pointed audio storytelling from the students. So that work came together as part of an exhibit that was on display for a month in summer 2024 at the Los Angeles Center for Photography. That was just one other collaboration partner that we were able to have to be able to showcase not just the students' work, but also the photographers. So when you walk through, you not only saw the photos, but there was a QR code that led you to these mini podcast episodes that the students had created around the interviews that they were doing and around additional research that they did. So when you walk in, you see the wonderful big wall describing the project, and you can all see their names. And you walk through and you're able to hear the voices of the people that you're seeing, and you're able to hear how people live through some of this.
Wow, that's such a 21st century project for students to learn. And I imagine that's just really revealing things in their own community that they had no idea about. And there's a connection between environmental racism and environmental justice in schools. The
Yes.
studies have shown, schools in areas that experience environmental racism or disproportionate, whether it's lead paint or whether it's air quality. And actually in Los Angeles, schools in South LA have had issues with their fountain water drinking it.
Yes.
And studies confirm that these things actually impact test scores, impact the ability of students to concentrate and other things, and
Yes.
even many high schools don't have actual grass that students can play on.
Yes. Part of that urban heat island effect contributed to by, straight blacktop and concrete and not a tree in sight for any sort of shade.
Right.
So,
It's like deserts, where all the nature has been removed from it, and we expect students to thrive and flourish in that kind of environment.
yes. Yes.
So can you talk more about Wilmington specifically? Because I know the Next Door expose really dug into there. But my understanding is Wilmington it's 9 square miles,
Yes.
but a third of that is industrial property.
Yes. So Wilmington, it's a small, tight-knit community. Like I said, it's right near the Port of LA. It is predominantly Latine, with some Black residents as well. There's a large percentage of people who are immigrants or foreign-born. And in talking to some of the residents, they kind of feel like they're just flown over and ignored. There's some very strong advocates for trying to work toward better conditions, trying to work with some of their local government leaders. And a lot of what we heard is this has been an uphill battle. The area is very, very industrial. And we had one resident straight up say, it's industrial, but we did not do this. We did not put large quantities of liquid petroleum gas in our areas. We did not redirect major semis and trucks through our neighborhood that cause massive amounts of pollution, the noise that comes from it at all hours of the night, and the dust that comes from all of this that settles on everything. There's a woman that we spoke with, and she showed us through her home and through her backyard. There's dust on everything.
Wow.
And they don't necessarily know what they're breathing in. This dust may contain chemicals and toxins that are hurting her and her family. Nobody's tested this. She spoke with us about the fact that one of the companies that had previously operated in this area, they at least used to spray it down with water so that it tamped down some of the dust. The new company that has come in, they don't do that. So the dust has just exponentially gotten worse. So she's like, I sweep 3 to 4 times a day. I mean, there's dusty footprints all through my house from my kids and my husband. Her husband wiped the cover on the barbecue grill, and that was actually the main image for the exhibit. Just one hand, it kind of encapsulate everything that they are living through. And Wilmington, unfortunately, is kind of a microcosm of all of the problems that we were exploring in one very compact area. So not only are these folks who are Black and brown, they're people who are immigrants or foreign-born who already, can be a little bit hesitant about speaking up for their rights, but they're experiencing problems from the trucking. They're having issues with air quality from all of the dust. They're having issues with the legacy of oil infrastructure. One of our students and photographer teams went on what they call a toxic tour. So they invite local officials, they invite advocates, and they invite residents to help educate people who are not as familiar with these concepts or have never seen what this looks like up close. It's like, well, my neighborhood isn't like this. Well, let's show you what someone's neighborhood does look like. One of the residents who spoke, she was saying, everybody here knows somebody with cancer. She's like, 2 people in my family have cancer, and I battled cancer. At one point, they pointed out a backyard that had a wall, and there you could see the oil bubbling up out of the ground. And she started talking about the fact, yeah, we don't have gardens. We can't grow food here because the ground's toxic. We don't have outdoor pets because they'll eat, what's in the yard and they will die. So imagine we're people who are living here. How safe is this for us? We can't have flowers and pets, but we live here.
And they live there out of necessity because,
Exactly.
unfortunately, it's this cycle. Because it's not the best place to live, it's more affordable. And then there's also the added thing that I actually have family friends that live in Wilmington. And it's hard for them to leave because those companies will offer jobs
Yes.
to the local residents at a higher, pay rate. And so they're sort of stuck, not just because of the environmental racism, but because it's already a redlined area. It's already an area with not many opportunities.
Yes.
It's an area that's overlooked because of the community that lives there. You sort of find yourself stuck in your environment.
Yes, absolutely. And what makes it worse is in addition to it being an area that a lot of people feel stuck in because of economics, because of it's a less expensive place to live. It's not terribly inconvenient to other things, but they're a tight-knit community.
Right.
They don't want to break up this community. One of the women that we spoke with who works with the Wilmington Neighborhood Council, she was telling us about the fact that she knew of 3 liquid petroleum gas explosions in her lifetime that she could remember.
Wow.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, this is what doesn't make the news. So tanks that are improperly handled, or basically the LPG is not stored under the right conditions, or it's not handled correctly, it's resulted in major blast. So when this has happened, it has destroyed property. It hasn't necessarily burned a house down in every case, but it has made them unlivable, at least for some amount of time. Or in some cases, the damage is so extensive that folks couldn't afford to fix it. So she talked about the fact that sometimes the companies will offer payouts, just minimal payouts. We're talking less than $2,000. And it's quick money. So I can't live here right now. I don't have any other place to go. So they'll pick up and leave. And the folks who wanted to stay and wanted to rebuild don't necessarily have the capacity to do that. They're like, I got to take this because I got to feed my kids.
Right.
I don't have any place else to go. So some of these environmental problems, they're just perpetuating a cycle of people who remain without a voice or feeling that they can't speak up about these things, feeling that they don't have access to people who can bring wider awareness to it, and that they're stuck in this cycle of, I can't leave.
Right. I mean, 3 explosions in one lifetime is way
Yes.
too much. There are probably still particles in the air from
Yeah.
those explosions. And as you mentioned, Wilmington is a microcosm of what's happening all over. And right now we have a federal government that's actually really aggressively trying to eliminate the words environmental justice from any federal documents, any federal departments, and also the oversight that the federal government had
Yes.
within different communities, whether it's, in Cancer Alley, what's happening in Louisiana or in Memphis or in Alabama, where they couldn't even have drinking water, and now the federal government is withdrawing more from even that. So, what impact do you see this current administration or the current policies having on local environmental movements?
So I see it definitely as a ripple effect. As we start talking less and less and trying to couch more and more diversity, equity, inclusion, and talking more about merit and, things that, well, you have control over that. When we start talking about the tamping down of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, we're really talking about justice. We're really talking about who gets what and under what circumstances. We're not just talking about affirmative action. We're not just talking about race-conscious decisions. We're talking about things that directly impact people's lives because of the color of their skin. And then we're talking about who gets what and when and under what circumstances because of who they are, a piece of them that they cannot change. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, when you look at a Black person, when you look at a person of color, it's not something we can take off. And because of that, it's something that people are immediately able to point to and say, well, maybe you're not as deserving. We need to even the playing field so people who also don't look like you have more opportunities, not thinking necessarily about the fact that most of us started way before the start line. we're paces and paces backward because of systemic issues that far predate any of us being alive. These are systemic issues. It's not a matter of your personal influence on, environmental justice or social justice. You're part of a system and systemic issues that you didn't necessarily help create, but we're bearing the brunt of having to deal with those now. So the current administration, policies that are being set forward are only setting us farther back. Climate change does not discriminate. It doesn't care if you're wealthy. It does not care how much money you have in the bank. It does not care if your kids go to private school, as we just saw with the fires. Not only did Altadena have devastating losses with higher loss of life, in part because of some of the systemic issues that were involved with alerting people and helping them evacuate and making sure that they had the resources that they needed once they got out. Palisades burned too, but that's what we heard about. There was there were fewer people who were killed in the Palisades fire than in Altadena. Altadena is also a much smaller area, but the impact was more pointed because you're talking about people who are not millionaires. We're talking about people who don't have a second or third home that they can fly off to. We're talking about places where people have lived there for generations, and so they just lost in an instant everything that they could pass on to their children or their grandchildren. So climate change, environmental issues, they don't discriminate, but how we respond to them as a society, how we respond to them in terms of what our government leaders decide to do, that is where the difference comes in. And that is the direct impact on people's lives.
Right. And it's really unfortunate that you can see with this administration the failure and the removal of oversight, because it's up to the government to protect citizens from corporations that want to pollute the air, from toxic chemicals going into the ocean. And I keep thinking about the situation in South Memphis where the Elon Musk AI factory is going there and literally pumping formaldehyde and smog into the air without permits to operate these turbines. And the government is failing to oversight and do anything there, even though they literally don't have the permits to do the illegal operations, and the government still isn't stepping in.
I mean, the government inaction honestly doesn't surprise me, not just because of the current administration, but the government doesn't have a great track record with enforcing the policies that we actually have in place. I mean, we have policies that allow companies to basically treat emissions like credits, to treat them like, well, I emitted less than I estimated, so let me sell those credits to you because you emitted more so that you don't have to pay for having been over your emissions limit. It's a shell game that doesn't necessarily involve us who are on the ground living with the result of what is pumped into our air. The air doesn't stop at the county line. It does not stop at, the neighborhood subdivision. It does not care. So not only are the folks who are in and around those factories and companies breathing it in, it travels. If you remember from the wildfires, I live in South Los Angeles, a good 30 miles from Altadena. We were getting ash on our cars. I was smelling smoke. My eyes were burning from the chlorine and all of the household chemicals that burned up into the air that was causing the air quality to be so poor. I mean, it doesn't care whether you're rich or you're poor. It's something that we all suffer from, and then we all suffer the consequences from. We just don't suffer them proportionately.
Right. When it comes to government oversight, you make a great point in the sense that there's duty, which is to protect citizens, and there's reality, which is it was really about protecting the interests of those, larger corporations. So what do you think, having spoken, AfroLA is on the ground speaking to these people in these communities, what can those who live in those communities and those who are hearing about this do on the ground level to sort of help or at least raise awareness? If the government's not going to do it, what can we do?
As much as I wish there was a magic bullet and we could just broad stroke, we're going to fix it all. It's really about fixing systems.
Sure.
I mean, we built these over decades. We're not going to tear them all down and start over overnight. I think one of the strongest things that residents in some of these areas can do is be loud, be vocal, and come together. We can't fight each other over this because it's not something that we're fighting as individuals. There's power in collection. There's collective power is one of the most critical assets that we have in fighting racism, structural and systemic racism, environmental injustices. Because chances are, if the water coming out of your tap is too toxic for you to drink, your neighbor is experiencing the same problem. You're all buying bottled water. You all have the same lead pipes that are feeding the water into your apartment complex. It's not just you. And as we start to talk to each other, it's like, oh, that's happening to you too? Let's complain. Like, let's do something. And that's one of the things that was so wonderful to see with our Next Door exhibit. We had people who realized, oh, it's not just me. There's people all over the county who are experiencing this. There are people even outside of LA County in the Inland Empire who are dealing with similar issues. It's not just my neighborhood. This is a much bigger problem than just our one little area. And talking to some of these advocates and other people who work directly with those communities, seeing what the power of collective action has actually been able to accomplish. So, for example, there's a couple of groups who have been fighting for years against the closure of some of the oil infrastructure in Inglewood. And we now have, policies that actually allow for that, to close it down. And now they're fighting for, well, what do we do with all of this stuff? The oil derricks don't necessarily, you don't see them bobbing up and down anymore, but how do we get this shit out of our communities? I mean, and it's a matter of, well, how can we come together and apply enough pressure for this to actually change? There's one very pointed example from one of our students actually discovered. He was shocked that this had happened. Beverly Hills High School. They had an underground oil well way out on the edge of the athletic field. And parents went ballistic that their kids could possibly be exposed. And they started coming up with these false equivalencies about, there's this cluster of kids who are sick. Luckily, the judge called BS on it, and it's like, no, your kids don't have cancer because of this. But it was the fact that money talked. And it's like, we have to get this away from our kids. It's like, what about this entire community that is not just a high school? We're talking 4 or 5 city blocks for a school, maybe. We're talking about an entire community where you stand on the ridge, and we have a picture to prove it. You can see houses interspersed with oil derricks. What about these people? How do we help those people? And a lot of that is coming together and applying enough pressure that things start to change. If we're loud enough, at some point, we cannot be ignored. And that's what I find so powerful about AfroLA. The fact that we can help people be loud. We will amplify your voices. If you come to us or we see you, we can help you be visible to others, people who are really, really going to have that decision-making power. I have no problem pissing people off. It's actually one of the most fun parts of this job. I have no problem sending, copies of our reporting to assembly members and legislators and, knocking on doors and saying, hey, have you seen this? These are your constituents. So we're delivering this to you, hand delivering this to you, electronically delivering this to you. We have even sent things certified mail, so you have to sign for it. Wow. So when you go to, the House floor, you cannot say nobody told you. Right. There is no excuse. So what are you going to do about it?
I've got to say it's very refreshing, especially in this day and age, to know that there can be a media outlet just feels not comprehensive enough, but in the grand scheme of things, a media outlet that wants to be part of building that collective power, to be part of the community, to actually be a voice and not sort of a pundit. And so I just want to take this opportunity. I don't mean to break from everything, just to thank you for the work that you do. I come from the communities I lived among the communities that you cover. And so that really does mean a lot.
Thank you. It's one of the reasons that I was so honored to lead this kind of organization. And to your point, I don't consider us an outlet either. We're I call us a newsroom, even though we're all remote and kind of spread out all over the place. But we're like this networked force that we have no problem going to where the issues are and connecting with people in a way. Sometimes if we're not the ones equipped to tell the story, we'll pass the mic. If it makes more sense coming from the resident who's experiencing it, help us understand. Let's tell it through your voice in an authentic way. I would say that one of the other things that we really take to heart is we're reporting by, for, and about communities, which often gets pegged as, well, you're an activist group. I'm like, know we're human. We are human and we live in these communities. We are here. And if we're experiencing this problem, our neighbors are experiencing this too. So who are we to not try to do something, to call attention to it and try to help better things, not just for ourselves. It's about the group. It's about the community. And how can we inspire other people to do something too?
Absolutely. And with that, do you have any final tips for storytellers or journalists in this era where journalists and news rooms and outlets are under attack and the media is being questioned and it could seem harder to get true stories out?
I would tell folks who, if you want to do something, don't be afraid to act out. Don't be afraid to speak up. If you're afraid to do that by yourself, connect with organizations like ours. We will help you. We will help you get your story out. If you're a content creator or an influencer, use your platform. Use what you have to leverage to help someone else's story get out. If you're a member of the community who wants to make your voice heard and you want to tell your story, come talk to us. If you are in a position you feel like it's too dangerous for you to do that, on the record or in plain sight, we will help protect you. We are unconventional in that the bar for anonymity and protection of sources far extends beyond, folks like domestic violence survivors. Mm-hmm. We consider imminent harm to be something that is much more than just physical harm. So if you're afraid, come to us. We will protect you and we will do our best to make sure that the story gets out in a way that is meaningful and that is going to help not just you, but the community as well.
To that end, where can people find you?
You can find news content and more at afrolanews.org. If you feel so compelled, hit us up with some change at afrolanews.org/donate. And you can find us at social. All of our handles are at afrolanews.
Well, thank you for the work you do and the stories you tell. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Know Your Rights Camp podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media platforms at Your Rights Camp and also on YouTube, subscribe at Know Your Rights Camp.